Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Natalie Guest. I'm with the Magnolia Business Alliance, and we have Laurie Johnson here with 4 Elements Coaching, who's going to go over some strategic planning with us. A little bit about Laurie. Her and I actually met at a Mississippi Gulf Coast Chamber event months ago and just kind of connected and decided we wanted to work together to support small business and nonprofits here on the Gulf Coast and wherever we could reach them. Laurie has extensive experience in nonprofits and small business development. She also serves with local community and state and national nonprofits, and she's been doing so for over 15 years. In fact, she's one of the founders of the Women's Entrepreneurs Group, which is now under the Mississippi Gulf Coast Chamber, and she continues to serve on the advisory committee for that program. She is originally from the Chicago area, but she has lived in many states and became a Mississippian in 1992. And she also lives in Bay St. Louis now. And she has completed her degree in psychology at William & Carey in 1997, where she actually graduated top of her class. And we look forward to learning much more about Laurie and all the different things that she can provide us and our organization and our members. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Laurie. Just so that everyone knows really quick, though, that we are recording this webinar, and it will be provided to you when we complete the webinar. And try and save all of your questions to the end. I'm going to have everybody on mute so we don't hear any background noise. However, if you have a question, you are more than welcome to type it into the chat, and we'll try and get to that as soon as possible. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Laurie. And again, Laurie, thank you so much for your time today, and we look forward to learning more about strategic planning.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited. I didn't know anything about the Magnolia Business Alliance until you spoke at the Women Entrepreneurs meeting. So it's really a great organization, and I'm really honored to be asked to support you today in this training. So one of the reasons that the strategic planning training is one of my favorites is because I have in my business, 4 Elements Coaching, I have kind of what I believe are 4 elements for success. So I work with almost all of my clients on one or all of these 4 elements at some point in our time together. And the first one really is a vision of where you want to go, what you want to accomplish. And it can be a long-term vision of a successful retirement, and it can also be a vision of what you want your business to be. So there's sort of a personal vision and a professional vision that are somewhat different, but I think they're both equally important. The second thing is a plan to help you get there, and we'll talk about that today. That's one of the elements. Certainly it will include kind of goals and timelines and who will manage what and when. And if it's a personal plan, you know, the same thing, kind of what you want to do, what things are on your bucket list, that kind of thing. And then I really think that if you don't have focused, consistent action on that plan, that it just will sit there. It'll sit in a drawer and it won't get done. And so I really believe in helping people stay accountable by creating action items for themselves, creating ways in which they can achieve those goals successfully without feeling like they're overwhelmed or that they're drifting off of mission or a purpose. And then the last thing, which may be the most important thing, is a belief or a mindset that you can do it. I have a vision board next to me, and it has a little meme that says, "Get up every morning and remind yourself I can do this." And I think that it takes a lot of constant affirmation and constant reminding that you can do something and that you have the skills and the talents to do it, and you have to believe that you can succeed. So those are my 4 elements for success. So today we're going to talk about strategic planning. And I also think setting a yearly vision and focus for your business and creating a yearly plan are critical. And we'll talk about how some people have done long-term strategic plans, and in the past that was very prominent, but I really think that setting out your year with an idea of what you really want to accomplish in mind, or especially if it's one big kind of, you know, what they used to call big, hairy, audacious goals, and a lot of the books that we read, and maybe they still do, I think just setting yourself up for one major success in every year is really important to your planning and to your success, and to keep you moving on and feeling like you are successful. So we're going to talk about 3 things today because strategic planning is a huge undertaking for some people, and it's a very simple undertaking for others. So we're going to make this kind of applicable, hopefully, to everybody. So we're going to talk about why strategic planning is important for you, what are some of the ways you can effectively and simply create a plan or begin to create your plan, and what accountability measures you can build in pretty easily. So first we'll talk about why strategic plans are important. So they really just help you stay true to your mission and your vision for your organization. As I said earlier, it's kind of easy to get a phone call or agree to do something for a friend or even a vendor or client, and that might not be an ideal something for you to spend your time doing. But then it's easy to kind of get distracted too by too much education or by kind of micromanaging on one particular detail that you think is really critically important in that moment, and then the rest of the plan kind of, or the rest of your goals kind of fall to the wayside for a while, and then you beat yourself up later for not kind of having gotten those things all done. So we can get really distracted, and I think these days it's even more easy to get distracted. We get distracted by Facebook, we get distracted by a lot of opportunities to download information that we think will help us be successful, and then to sign up for a newsletter and to do all these things, and we never really consider whether or not we can actually use those things effectively and whether or not they'll actually be helpful to us. So that all gets kind of bunched in our to-do list. But when you have a strategic plan, when you have kind of a map to guide you, it really helps to keep you from getting distracted by all of the other things that can muscle in on your time. So one of my favorite books, and you may have talked about this in other trainings, is a book called The E-Myth Revisited. I've loved it for years, and now I understand it's recommended by a lot of, like Goldman Sachs and a lot of other training programs that help small businesses. But Michael Gerber wrote this book, if you aren't familiar, and he says, your strategic objective is a very clear statement of what your business has to ultimately do for you to achieve your primary aim. So you hear what he's saying there. It's not what you're doing, it's what you're creating your business to do for you, and your primary aim, which is kind of your one focus. Now, he talks a lot about creating businesses to sell them ultimately, or creating businesses to, pull you into retirement. Your vision really should pull you forward. Whatever your primary aim or your vision is, it should really pull you forward. It should be the thing that you're always pushing everything toward. So if your vision, say, is a 6-figure, a 5-star restaurant that brings fresh, healthy ingredients and foods to people who are foodies and on a middle-class budget, or whatever it might be, then everything you do is geared toward that vision or that primary aim. And your plan, your solid strategic plan, really answers your questions of when you're going to do these things, what you're going to do, how, where, what standards you're going to adhere to, how you're going to measure whether you were successful, and that kind of thing. So strategic plans are preparatory work, obviously. They're back office kind of work, if you will, but they really enhance the day-to-day operations of your business and make them more seamless, because your business then starts to work for you. Eventually, that's the goal. So it's an infrastructure piece. So if you think of strategic planning like I do, and I found this graphic, which I love because I had already written the outline for what I was going to talk about today, but it really is like putting together a puzzle. So if you've ever put a puzzle together, or you're really good at it, you know that you begin by choosing something that you really like, and it looks like something that you can do. You don't want to choose something that you can't master, right? Like one of my other favorite authors, Daniel Pink, talks about what motivates us, and one of the things is mastery. And so if you can't do something, and you can't, again, believe that you can do it and have the skills and talents to do it, you're not going to want to pick it up. So you want something that looks like you can put it together. That's your vision, that box, that puzzle that you take off the shelf. Then you open the box and you put the photo of the puzzle, that vision piece, in front of you so that you see what it is you're working toward. You dump all the pieces out, you group them together, probably by shape. Everybody puts the corners and all the outside pieces together, right? Then you put the inside pieces kind of grouped together by color or by specific design. And then you start putting it together, probably in sections. You maybe start with the outside first and the corners, and then maybe you start with sky or grass or whatever it is that your design looks like. But if you've ever seen those puzzles that don't actually show you what the end result will look like, they're pretty complex. They're not impossible to do. You can do it, but it takes a lot more brain power, and generally it takes longer for you to put it all together. So the question is, do you want something to go by, or do you want to just wing it and not have something in front of you to tell you what to do? And a lot of times when I coach clients, they'll tell me, especially when they're starting up a business or they're working in a nonprofit for the first time, if they haven't had a lot of orientation and transition, they tell me, I don't know what's most important to do. I don't know what to do with my day. I just keep getting distracted by all these phone calls or all these petty complaints from my staff or all these different things, and I don't have a clear sense of what to do. And strategic planning can really help you do that. It also helps you become more proactive rather than reactive. Business owners and executives without a plan, as I said, are usually, they feel less successful. And maybe they aren't less successful, but they're always feeling like they're spending a lot of time putting out fires or just kind of wandering, as I just mentioned. It helps your team stay on track. It helps you inspire them to be more professional because they know that they also have a part in this roadmap to play. They're accountable. They can also be, and you can be more creative. Although it seems like you would be constantly rigidly following a plan, what happens is the plan entertains the left side of your brain so that the right side of your brain can take that extra space that the left side has taken up by making sure that it understands day to day, minute to minute, hour to hour, what the goal is, what the plan is, what has to be done today. The right brain can then be more creative and have the space and capacity to think ahead and to really just kind of enjoy the work rather than to just feel like you're always treading water or trying to stay afloat. Strategic plans help everybody stay on track and stay in their own lane, especially if you've delegated aspects of the plan to specific individuals or teams. They assist in the growth and development of your company. They assist in their own personal growth and development, and we'll talk about personal and professional individual plans as well. So everybody knows what they're doing. And certainly strategic plans are helpful if you're writing or updating business plans, if you're seeking out funding, if you're thinking about managing human and financial resources year to year. When will I know to add more staff? To add more financial resources, to add more programs and services or products. They're helpful when you're selling your company, certainly, and you're thinking ahead about doing that or creating an exit strategy over a period of time for yourself, when you're downsizing or upsizing. If you're a nonprofit, but even at businesses too, if your organization has to meet standards from a particular governing body or a regulatory agency, a strategic plan is necessary. You don't even really always have a choice of whether to write a strategic plan. But you shouldn't create one just to check a box and stuff it in a drawer. And I worked with a lot of nonprofits when I was a state director. One of the things they had to do was go through a quality assurance assessment every, I think it was every 3 years at that time, and a strategic plan was part of it. And a lot of times I would see a nonprofit director write the plan without talking to her board and then present it to the board, or they would not include employees or stakeholders, volunteers, other people. So the strategic plans were written and they were complete, but they didn't really have the deeper, robust ability to guide the organization forward. They were just really created to check off that box. So I think that they should be an active part of your overall operation, your day-to-day, your quarterly, and your yearly operation. And I think they can really help you with your employees' success and accountability with leadership teams and managing workflow in your organization. So that's the why. Now, how you actually start to think about strategic planning. It used to be, excuse me, and of course, as soon as you started training, I had to get more coffee because my throat was sore, so I have coffee here. But it used to be that people would engage in these day-long or weekend-long or even week-long meetings or retreats, and they would cause their employees to kind of stress out because they'd be away from the office and they'd be talking in circles about things that they already talk about pretty frequently in their staff meetings or board meetings. And so people would just kind of groan when you mentioned we need to have a strategic planning retreat. You can and should block off time to plan, but it doesn't and really shouldn't be an uncomfortable meeting time that takes everybody away from their normal work day or week, especially if you've got people that are really working at capacity with their time and their ability to manage their time in a day. So retreats can work, but it really depends. You really have to think about the way you work best and the way your teams work best and the way your business works. So the other thing is to really think about when strategic planning as a sort of the big beginning part of your goal, because you'll keep updating it and reflecting back on it and evaluating it, but when it makes sense to start. For most people who have businesses or organizations whose fiscal years start January to December, they start strategic planning around now and basically September, October, because a lot of people take off December, so September, October, November are the perfect times for you to really begin to develop that plan. If your fiscal year is October 1 to September, then of course you would do it in the summer, which works out in some ways better for people too, because they have maybe a slower time in the summer, but some folks do not. So you just really have to look at your schedule and the way that you work and the way that you prepare and how much time you need in advance to begin to execute that plan. If you're somebody like me who plans out a lot of trainings and opportunities and conferences and things for a year, then I have to really think ahead a couple of months to be able to do that. A lot of my clients do conduct strategic plannings in a series of meetings, and I do facilitate some of those, and I think that it is helpful to get an outside facilitator. It certainly doesn't have to be me, but I do think that outside facilitators can look at a company with a really fresh lens, and they ask questions and inquire about things that staff or leadership don't often ask because they're assumed or people just don't want to change anything, right? We have a resistance to change sometimes. We get worried that that'll mean more work or that'll mean a bigger learning curve. So an outside facilitator can sometimes help people create really innovative strategies and opportunities and come up with new ideas. And they can often keep people moving through the process more easily because they don't have a long-standing kind of rapport with each other or with the staff, and they just take a higher level view, and they always keep trying to direct people back to the process. So it is something to consider if you think a facilitator would help. But if you do decide to begin that way, my suggestion is you meet with or talk to your facilitator in advance to discuss what your expectations are, your desired outcomes, what time frame you're looking at, so you can both really manage outcomes and negotiate roles and understand what data has to be collected and available and what the process should look like in each segment of time. So you might want to segment it out over like a month or even 2 or 3 to ensure that the process continues to engage everybody rather than kind of feeling like a cluster of meetings that nobody wants to go to that take them away from their daily work, which is not what you want to do. And it should be fun. It should be enjoyable. It should be a space where people can be heard and be creative and innovative if that's what your business or nonprofit allows. So everybody should play a role in the planning before you actually write the plan, before you actually create the plan. So you're going to collect input and data from a variety of sources. As I said earlier, you want to involve other people in your plan. You're going to look over what you did years before. You're going to think about what you've done that you loved, what you've done that, or what you haven't done that you really wanted to do and just didn't get a chance to do it. Involving your staff, if you have staff in the process, is very helpful, especially if they're specialists or they have a particular gift for discernment or strategic thinking, or if you just plain value their opinion. I actually had a conversation, interestingly enough, the other day in a meeting I was at on Friday about a strategic planning session in a school. So I had a couple of thoughts about this as I was listening to two people who had been chosen to be a part of the strategic planning committee this year. One is a school employee and one is not. The one who's not felt like she was really honored to be a part of the strategic planning process. She was very excited. She felt important. She felt like her opinions and her contributions would be heard, and that she was really a part of the school in a new and deeper kind of way. The employee, though, as you might have considered when I said that the school was starting a strategic planning now, the employee is swamped. She's overwhelmed. School just started. She's got new students, new goals. Everything starts fresh for her. All of her outcome measures that she has to achieve have started over, right? She's at the beginning. And so for her, it was a little bit more stressful. But she was still happy about doing it, she mentioned. But she did seem a little more overwhelmed. So it's really important to think about involving people in your planning that aren't just employees. There are a lot of other ways to involve people in your strategic planning. You can involve colleagues that you want to work with. You can involve, board members. You can involve clients, vendors, customers, anyone who could give you input that you need. And we'll talk about how you can do that in a minute. But you also have to be careful, because if you involve other people, you can have two things happen. You can have too many people, too many cooks in the kitchen, as my mom used to say, or it can have the effect of kind of limiting you, so it can keep you thinking inside of a box rather than getting real creative. So however many people you add, however you do it, I think you should always have the caveat: we may not do or add everything you suggest, but we're going to work together to see what makes the most sense for our organization at this time. Now, this is the gold standard of strategic planning that everybody used to go by, a SWOT analysis. And this is my granddaughter who was having a bad day months and months ago. But it does seem like people are over it, and they just don't want to hear it anymore. And SWOT, if you're not familiar, stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. But strategic planning really shouldn't be a cookie-cutter approach. There are a lot of other ways for you to approach it. And if you're in a startup or you're just new in your position, you may not have any idea what threats there might be out there. Or your perceived threats in the beginning might actually be opportunities. I had a client not too long ago that was writing a business plan, and she was also strategic planning, and she considered a similar business down the street as a real threat to her business, to her opportunities. And we talked about that a lot, and we talked about not getting kind of hung up on that and not letting that affect her belief or her mindset. And she was getting there, and then once she was about maybe 6 or 7 months into the business, that competitor came to her and asked if she wanted to absorb their location, because they were ready to get out. They were ready to go, spend time in Cabo and retire. And of course that ended up not being a threat. It ended up being an opportunity to her. Now that doesn't happen always, but it is a possibility. So we need to think about that too. So for those who've been in business for a while, or for those who are starting, the same thing is true. Keep it short and simple, especially your first plan. You can grow into this, you can, get better at it, or you can take a really complex strategic plan that you've been working on and you hate and that your employees aren't staying accountable to, and just refresh it. Just make it more short and simple. I'm going to share with you, or I'm going to share actually with Natalie after. I have a resource slide, but if you can't see it, we'll see if we can link it to the YouTube video or some way for you to be able to see it, because it's kind of a long internet address. But there's a one-pager. There's a one-page strategic plan online at gazelles.com that's really very effective. It's really very simple. It doesn't take, a ream of paper to create a strategic plan. It shouldn't. So you really just start with what worked well, what didn't work well, what could we do differently, what will we definitely do differently, what do we need to go forward, what do we need to absolutely let go of. This could be clients, staff, team leaders, whomever. And if you have your employees, or if you yourself do action plans that fall along these same lines, like, the questions I just asked, or problems, plans, and challenges, however you do it, you want to write notes as you go along so that when you do the strategic planning, it's an ongoing fluid process. So you have those notes in your brain. You have those thoughts always and consistently with you, so that you say, okay, next year we're not going to do this anymore, or next year we're going to do this instead of that. If you rotate team leadership as a practice, which I really encourage, and I think we're going to do a training next month on teams and developing teams, but I think team leadership rotation is a good way you can do it to create very well-organized, productive teams. If you do that, your strategic planning sessions are a good time for you to meet with your current team leaders, and they will probably be able to help you assess who's ready to step up to the next level of leadership, so that you can include both your current team leader and your future team leader in your process. And then boards too. If you have a board president, and then you have a president that's coming in and absorbing that role next year, a lot of boards work that way, or in 2 years, whatever time frame, you should have both of those people. If you're going to create a plan that covers the time that person will be leading that area of your work, then you need to make sure that person is involved in your planning. I think that's really, really important. So it used to be that people created strategic plans 3 to 5 years in advance. And we find that now in this, which Chris Hardwick says, we're not in an information age, we're in the information management age. And I really think that's true, and I talked about that earlier. Having information at our fingertips now in our phones and in our tablets and even in our car screens is just a way of life for us. We don't remember what it was like not to have that. Our challenge now is how we manage it all, how we manage ourselves in accessing it, and how we manage processing it. And that's a whole nother training that I'm still always evolving around. But we can definitely plan ahead. We do have that opportunity to think ahead, especially if you're building an extra phase of your work into your business, or if you're creating a whole nother structure, or whatever the aspects are, you are going to want to plan ahead a little bit. But actually thinking about, what you can achieve in a 6-month to 1 year period is going to be critical for you to be able to flesh out what your day-to-day, week-to-week, and month-to-month activities are, especially for those people who are on your team with you. But those who have planned ahead, and this guy is a great example, have really made incredible strides with their long-term strategic planning, right? So Walt Disney started with a mission, and that mission is pretty much the same as it is today. He started with an idea of having a location in a small community in California, but he also had his eye on some land and property in Florida, and he was always thinking ahead. And that quote is one of my favorites, because I think that being curious and doing new things is what keeps us moving forward and keeps our businesses successful. So this guy clearly had a long-term plan. Now look at how simple their vision statement is. That's it. That's their company vision statement. Everything that they do reflects back to that. So when you think about everything that they do now, that vision pulled them forward, but they decided how and what they would do in order to make people happy, and that changed, I'm sure, every year. It may have changed every month at some point, because they grew pretty exponentially at one time, and still pretty much do. So all these things that probably weren't even a thought in Walt Disney's mind when he died now exist. So they have Disneyland, Disney World, Disneyland Paris, Hong Kong, Shanghai, Tokyo, Hawaii, a cruise line, a vacation club, you get it, right? They have a host of Imagineers. There are over 1,700 Imagineers. They have a research team in 40 countries. Now that's a big, evolving strategic plan. That didn't start that way. When he created Disney World, and you can look at vintage videos of the vision for that and the growth of that, because he actually shared it with who? His stakeholders. He shared it with all the people that he wanted to make happy. He shared it with all of the people that he hoped would come and join him and become customers and people who loved and adored what he created. And it worked, right? So bear that in mind if you think of, and there's a lot of, I actually have a book that I bought when I was in Disney World around employee leadership and team development, and it's fantastic. We have a great way of making this work for them. But it evolved. It didn't start out that way because they just didn't have that kind of a team when they began. So the ways that you can create a team are ongoing. The most successful, or create a plan, sorry. The most successful planners are those that plan in an ongoing way, constantly reviewing, constantly looking at the tool. Again, it should not stay in a drawer, and we'll talk about ways you can keep it in front of you. And keeping it in front of your teams. You're always planning ahead for the next year, for the year after that as you go along, and as I said, you're always making notes about what to include, what to take away, what to refine. If your timelines change for some reason, then you change the timeline. So you're constantly evaluating your capacity, the interest that people have in staying on the current course, and then you have information next year rapidly, easily at your fingertips about what worked well and what challenges came up around the plan. You're going to research trends. You're going to read books. There are a lot of books about strategic planning. Some are very expensive. Some are very small and much more inexpensive and affordable. But you're going to read some books, you're going to read some information, but again, don't overthink it. Just take what you need and manage it, use it, and then, see where you are at that time. Set aside some time just for brainstorming, which I think is very, very important. Keeping, a mentor, coaches, teachers, colleagues, people that you can learn from, ask questions of, people who might share their strategic plan with you. I think in the nonprofit sector, people are pretty open to doing that. Maybe not as open in the business sector, but I still think people will do it. I think people are generally helpful and want to help others succeed. Ask questions, say yes to opportunities, and then just try them out. Ask why you would do something one way or another. So when you plan this way, it goes much, much faster every year. So some of the tools that people can use really easily are pretty inexpensive, pretty easy to access. So one of them I like is 360-degree feedback. Now people get, when I say, have you done a 360-degree feedback survey, people say, oh, those cost too much money, or, I don't know, I'm nervous about people giving me feedback about my performance or about the way I do things. You don't have to pay somebody to do a 360. You can do your own 360 by interviewing employees, board members, having somebody else who's a neutral party interview your employees. I did this recently for a nonprofit, for them to be able to understand what their perceived brand was in the community and why people would or would not join their organization. And they weren't asking, I was asking. So I was a neutral party. It didn't matter to me whether somebody joined or didn't join. What mattered to me was that I collected data for them so that they could understand what they needed to do next year going forward. So just talk to people. Talk to clients, vendors, colleagues, anybody who can help you determine what your brand is, your brand reputation is, what your influence is in the community or in the mission or in the work that you're trying to do, what things you've done that are very successful and that show your professional expertise and your reputation, and some areas that might be a challenge. and people will give you honest feedback, especially if they can do it in an anonymous way. Yes, if people do it directly to you, they may not be as forthright with you about the things that they think you could do differently, but they might. But there are a lot of mechanisms like surveys, online inexpensive and free surveys that you can do. You can mail out surveys and have them mailed back to you anonymously. There's a lot of ways that you can evaluate that. For the state nonprofit that I worked for, I had a program of, at one time, 18 CASA programs, local CASA programs. So every year for my personal evaluation, I got I sent out a survey. They filled it out and returned it either electronically or sealed in an envelope to my board chair. So that person then could take a look at what they were thinking and what we offered them and what else we could offer them. Then that board chair took those surveys, compiled them in a spreadsheet, and we used that data to, of course, where you're thinking, to create our strategic plan. They also use that data to evaluate me as an employee, but by and large we used a lot of that data for our strategic planning. What do you appreciate that we do? What do you wish we could do in addition to what we currently do? How well are we doing what we do? What comments do you have about this or that? So those are opportunities for you to get feedback from people, and you really should and can do that pretty easily and inexpensively. Then you're going to take a look at your last year's hard data, information on employee performance, on your sales, revenue, expenses, client served, whatever it is that you collect. And again, just taking a look at data sometimes takes a while to compile, but once you do it, and you start to realize how to do it, you have a process for doing it, then that process becomes more seamless later when you do it again. And you really want to kind of consider your return on investment for the things that you spent money on or that were critical to your operation, or those things that you realize you spent money on that were not, which I think we all do. So really take a look at that and say, is this something we want to spend money on next year? So again, surveys, but this can help you with and I think that this is helpful in two ways, really working with employee accountability and helping them evaluate their performance, you evaluate their performance, and helping them create a work plan is so beneficial when you transition in new hires, when you promote an employee and they're, transitioning their work to someone else. When you have to decide whether to downsize, you definitely want some data about that employee's performance and about their process in your overall success. And so a strategic plan helps them create, based on that plan, a monthly and yearly work plan for themselves, based on what areas of accountability within the are assigned to them and what those time frames are. So it really ensures you that every employee has a timeline for their portion of the strategic plan. And then you can evaluate them. You can see when they're getting stuck, when they don't finish, or when they waited till the last minute, which can be fine for some employees as long as they did a more than satisfactory job. A lot of people who are great employees, fantastic employees, procrastinate, and it creates the best in them. And I sometimes procrastinate on certain things too. But sometimes people who procrastinate are not as successful in their outcomes. So really taking a look at that is important. And a strategic plan can help you understand whether or not they procrastinated, because you always have that time frame involved. So I think creating personal and professional work plans for yourself as an employee, as well as for team leaders and for businesses, are really, really important, and yourself as an owner or an ED. So really breaking that into monthly and quarterly chunks, and somewhere that you can see them in some form or fashion every day. They include objectives and deadlines so that nothing falls through the cracks. You can even include in your, strategic plan or in an employee's work plan or your work plan, when things are due to be renewed. This is critical. I actually heard a story, and I don't know if it's true or not because there's a lot of stuff now. I think it's true, but I'm not positive. One of the candidates for one of the particular political parties earlier in the year failed to renew their personal domain. It just I guess it just went out of the focus of whoever was responsible for it. So one of the other candidates bought that domain and started to use it for a time. And I did check because I was curious when I heard this, and it did indeed apparently happen. I don't think it's that way now, but I think it did happen. So these are things that you don't want to have happen. These are kind of critical things, right, some of them. So you just want to make sure that you have those things somewhere where they don't break down in the process. We talked about earlier consistent, focused action, so important, and it really does happen when your plan is somehow in your view. It drives accountability and evaluation mechanisms, and it helps you when you're transitioning new people in to your organization, because you have a much better way of orienting them when you know exactly what work it is that they will be doing and when they're going to be doing it. So use what works for you. It can be as simple as this, and this is an example of a way that I plotted out a training a while ago. I started doing it this way, and then of course I transitioned it to a different way, but this stayed in my view. You know, that's my wall, so my TV is there, and I can see how the 3 tiers of my training and what that looks like for my clients every day. If you're stuck, then you really have to, if you look at the plan and you're really thinking, I don't know that this is working or getting done, then you really have to evaluate. Again, ask those same questions. What works? What's not working? Why is it not working? What's getting in our way? And it may be a capacity issue. It may be a financial issue. It may be that you just don't like it. You just don't want to do it, and you have to wrap your brain around that. But if you're looking and evaluating and you can't find answers to the questions that you're asking, then, you know, it may be a coach or someone else can help you get unstuck. I get people unstuck a lot. That's part of what coaching does. But, you know, are you procrastinating? Why? What has to be in place? What, you know, accountability mechanisms would help somebody, for example, if they're procrastinating? Are you hanging on to an employee who can't master what they're doing or is really burned out? And you can arrange some interventions. Again, some coaching. You can create employee performance improvement plans, or, you know, other things to help them get unstuck, mentors or team leaders or whatever it might be. But if you're stuck, you need to continually kind of ask those questions around that plan and frame maybe some solutions that might help you. And if you're still stuck, then, you know, just keep asking what else you could do to get unstuck. So I think we have done the why, the how or what, and the accountability piece. So this is not a great picture. I just realized how blurry it is. But I really do think that I really think that this is true. If you don't have a plan and you just say, I want to do this, some people are really good at holding things in their brains. I have found, and I had a parent with Alzheimer's, so I used to get panicked about whether or not I was getting early onset Alzheimer's. But what I found now is, and working with my clients and hearing everybody's fears around the same problem, the same memory issue, we just have too much on our minds. And unless we really start to structure systems and processes that will help us, like strategic plans, like checklists. There's a great book, if you've never read it, called, I think it's called The Checklist Manifesto. It was written by a surgeon who was realizing that doctors were making mistakes because they had too much on their minds, and that even things that they knew how to do by rote, and a lot of us have those processes and systems that we know how to do by rote, we just have too much on our minds, and things fall through the crack. And so I really think that planning is an efficient way to make sure that you actually get things done, that you actually get those activities and those things in place that really are meaningful to you and that help you create success personally and professionally. So do you have any thoughts or questions or success stories you want to share with us in the little bit of time that we have remaining? Anybody?
I'm good.
Good. Do you plan now, currently? I don't know who that is speaking, but do you currently use a plan?
No, my name is Rosalind Peterson, and I was just going through this and jotting down stuff. I I just became president of an organization, so I have so many, things I wish to do in that organization, and this has just really helped me out a lot. So
Good.
I plan to implement a lot of this and talk about how we can, the vision, because we have a long vision statement. So I need to go back and relook at that and just a lot of things as far as even bringing on new people, when the people who've been there so long hold on to positions. When we bring in new people, they get lost in the crack because I don't think we give them enough to become involved in their organization. I think they just become members and not involved members. So
Right.
it's a
Yeah,
lot of things,
that's a great observation. Yeah, yeah. Well, and let me just tell you this too, and I know that my contact information will be somewhere in the mix, and here's some resources too. But I'm always, so everybody that works with me gets a exploratory session to talk about or to work on anything that they want, whether it's a coaching issue, whether it's a consulting issue, whether they want to create a training or whatever it is. So please feel free to reach out to me. I'm not kidding. There's no obligation. You can or cannot move forward. But, my mission is really just to help people be successful, to help them grow, make small businesses larger businesses, and help nonprofits really grow to their capacity. So that is what I do. And my vision is that everybody has the tools to be successful and to do what they, to achieve their mission. So I'm happy to help you if you need to do that.
Wonderful. Great.
Here's the link to the one-page tool I talked about earlier, another link to the book that I actually just started reading. It's not for everybody. It may be too complex, but again, I think libraries are great. You don't have to spend a lot of money and have a book on your shelf that you're not going to love. And I also think that looking at reviews on Goodreads and on Amazon and other places to see if it was helpful to other people will help you discern whether or not it's something that would be helpful to you. I do like Michael Gerber for small business owners, the E-Myth Revisited, as I mentioned earlier. I also had a huge nonprofit library for our state office for the folks that we served at that time, and there was a guy, and now I won't be able to think of his name because I didn't put it in the resources, but he's a guru for nonprofits. I'll send it out to Natalie if she does a follow-up email, and really created a lot of leadership and executive leadership material that works for businesses and nonprofits as well. So there's a lot of information. Anybody else have questions or want to share if it was valuable to me? I always ask my clients at the end of a session what they got out of the session. So if you want to share that too, I'm happy to for you to comment.
Sure, Laurie. This is Steve Harrison. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Steve?
Doing well. I did a startup, I guess, almost last September, October. Worked pretty hard on it for 6 months. And the industry that I'm working in is significantly depressed right now, so I wasn't able to find any work, if you will. So I kind of halted, if you will, and I'm going to be doing a restart in October. And I do appreciate the webinar because it gives me, the insight of, how to start planning that restart, if you will. And a strategic plan and a review of my business plan is probably a first step. So I do appreciate your time and effort.
Sure, thanks. And good luck. And always ask for help. Tell people, tell us about what you're doing, either here or, offline, and, let us be your cheerleaders. I always tell people you need to create you know, and this is a whole different training, but you need to get people from awareness of what you do to raving fans. That's your goal. I have this little tool I share with people. So you want to move them up this table from just kind of knowing who you are to making them raving fans. And I use that with businesses and nonprofits. But help us just, you know, help us become your raving fans. Tell us what you're doing. Anybody else? I know we had a small group today because everybody's busy and they're going to try to manage this information at a later date, right, Natalie? They're going to commit to listening to this at a later date, which sometimes ends up you have an inbox full of things you're going to listen to at a later date. But hopefully people do get to do that and are able to access it while they're walking or exercising or multitasking in another way. So.
Well, thank you so much, Laurie. We really appreciate your time and the information. And as I mentioned to everyone, we will be sending over the recorded version of the webinar as well. So please feel free to share it with others. And again, thank you, Laurie. We appreciate your time and effort. We look forward. Our next one, just so that you know, she does have another one coming up in September. And let me grab that date really quick. That you guys, if you want to mark your calendar, if you have not RSVP'd for it already. What did we say it was? It is September. No, that's the same month. Come on,
I don't
Natalie.
have my planner right in front of me. Isn't that terrible? I put it on another.
It's September 20th. It's Tuesday, September 20th, and we're going to be talking about team development.
Right.
So same time, 10 a.m. And it should be on our Eventbrite page. So please feel free to register for that one, and hopefully we'll be talking to you then as well. All right, you guys, thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.